Hello everyone, my name is Fighting Pepper and welcome back to another episode of the Tile Scrolling Platformer expansion. This episode we'll be adding a couple objects, which next episode we'll add code to pick up and throw around. These objects are the trampoline and the POW block. These aren't super exciting on their own, I know, but once we get to picking them up and throwing them, that will be more exciting, but that will be the episode after this one. So you might also know that P-switches can be picked up and thrown. So if you haven't already, go ahead and watch my P-switch tutorial and then come back here. So as always, we'll start by going and grabbing the assets we need to make this. Okay, so we'll head over to my YouTube tutorial assets project and find this sprite. It's called TSPE Grabbing Part 1, at least right now. That name might change, but it should have like a trampoline. So we'll open up our backpack and drag the sprite into the backpack, the entire sprite, and that will get all the assets within it. Then we'll head back over to our main project. Alright, so we'll open up our backpack and drag the sprite into our sprites pane. Now let's take a look at what's inside. We got trampolines and POW blocks, and we have a brick particle because we will be adding particles to our brick blocks. We also have two sounds. Now we can hide the sprite because we don't need it showing in the middle of our thing. So I'm going to be handling these a little bit different than I handled the P-switch. It will be much easier to code holding and throwing if the items are enemies. So that means we'll need to turn our P-switch into an enemy. That shouldn't be too hard. We're going to enter the Mario sprite and look at the check below feet custom block. So this is what it looks like. Now we are going to get rid of this block because we don't need it. If this isn't a tile, if the P-switch isn't a tile, this isn't going to do anything. However, if you have conveyor belts, only remove the P-switch part of the block. So we need to go to where this is. I have the handy dandy scratch add-ons to find it, but if you don't, you can just find the move sprite Y block. It should be in there. Take it out, then destroy the block. Now remember, don't destroy the whole block if you have conveyor belts, because the conveyor belts are handled in that block. Okay, now let's go into the editor and show the tile key map list. Let's look for the P-switch tile. We'll change the 6 to a 9 because it's going to be an enemy. Hide the tile key map list. We can also remove the hash from it in the tile shape list. There's no reason to have a hash there. So next we have to go into the enemy and into the spawn type custom block. Let's check for a tile type of 84. That's going to be our P-switch. So we'll set the type to P-switch. And then the costume. Aha! We need to get the costumes in here. You can just take them from the tile sprite. Drag each of these costumes into the enemy sprite. We can delete the last 3. Okay, so now we see they're here. That's tile number 34. So let's put that in here in the costume input, 34. The width will be 15 and the height 15, so just smaller than a block so they can fit in a 1 block space. Alrighty, we'll make code for this in a second. But first, let's just remove the P-switch stuff from the tiles. We can take out this bottom part of the animate tiles block. And the bottom part of the test bump block I'll just separate off for the time being because we will use this later in our P-switch enemy. Okay, go into move enemy. Down at the bottom, let's duplicate this. If type equals P-switch, we're going to make a new block called tick P-switch. Run without screen refresh. Put it here. Oops, not up there. In here. And now we can begin coding up this block. Okay, first we'll add some gravity to it. Change speed y by -1. Then we'll move sprite y. Now this doesn't matter too much when we're not throwing it, because the P-switch probably isn't going to be in the air, but still, it's a good idea, because it's natural that, like, if we place a P-switch up in the air in the editor, it should fall to the ground. Or if it's above a brick block, and we P-switch that brick block into a coin, it should fall down. So, there is a reason for doing this. And this is one of the benefits of making it an enemy. We don't have to worry about the speed X right now, because it probably won't be moving in that direction. Now, let's check what happens when it is pressed. If it's touching Mario, and if the bop Y of Mario is greater than his Y position, this means that Mario is both moving down and it is above it. And also with this if statement that is touching Mario. This is all the conditions we need to check if it is pressed. So now we take the middle part from here, this part that we separated off, we'll drag it into the enemy sprite, and then we can delete this block of code. We will set this into the center. We don't need this replace item tile index of tile grid, obviously, because it's not a tile. But we do still want to play the animation when Mario presses it. So instead of doing this, we'll change costume by 1. Around here, we should also make sure the costume equals the root costume. Now, above here, let's work on the animation. If costume is greater than root costume, that means it's playing the animation. In that case, we'll change costume by 1. But if it's greater than root costume plus 3, that means it's done with the animation and should go bye-bye. So we'll delete this clone. Now at the bottom, we simply paint the sprite, so it appears. Wonderful. Now, this is our P-switch code. Shall we test it? Okay, so first we need to get rid of our old P-switch. Just eyedropper it and click on it. And oh no, that creates the enemy. What do we do? Well, we must eyedropper the air, and that is how we erase it. So now, we press the 9 key. And here it is. Here is our enemy. Let's play the game. And oh, look at that, it's backwards. Well, I'll get to that in a moment. But let's just make sure we can press it. Jump on it. And there we go. You'll notice that it's not playing the P sound, the P-switch sound. Now that's because in the sounds, we check for the P-switch in the move player event. And this is already after the P timer has gone down 1. Previously it would be before, but now that it is during the move enemy event, it is after. So we can change this move player to move player after enemy. And there we go. Now we get the music. Alright, now let's stop it from turning. Up here, we can just say set rotation style, don't rotate. And there we go. Easy as that, it doesn't rotate. Now you will notice that this is not solid, and that's just an unfortunate consequence of making an enemy. I know solid enemies would be something really nice to have, because we could do moving platforms, and it's certainly possible, but the amount of work needed to do it is very high, and I will not be doing that in this episode, and probably not anytime in the near future. Okay, now, while we're on the topic of P-switch improvements, should we give these brick blocks some particles? Because right now, they are very particleless. They just, bloop, disappear from existence. And some particles would be nice. More realistic, I guess. Not that killing walking mushrooms with rolling turtle shells is realistic, but you get the idea. We'll drag our brick break particle from our asset sprite, and we'll put it in the particles. We want 4 of these things at a time. So, say if type equals brick, brick break, and then we can remove this. In here, we'll create 4 separate particles. So, we need to change our type. So the original brick break type that spawns the brick break particles, the 2 types don't get confused and start spawning infinite particles. So, in here, we'll do the 4 particles with the different speeds and directions. So, for the first particle, we'll set speed y to 6. Now we also need to make a speed x variable, and we'll set speed x to 3 for the first particle. And we'll point to the right. Then create a clone of myself. Then, we'll set the speed y to only 3 instead. We'll keep the speed x and the direction the same. Then create another clone. We're going to set the speed y back to 6 and make the speed x -3. And we'll point to the left this time. Create a clone, set speed y to 3, and then create a clone. We actually don't need this last create clone, because the original itself will act as the particle. So now, let's check if the type is brick break particle. If we do, we'll make a new block, call it tick break particle. We'll slot it right here. So we'll always change the frame by 1, change x by speed x, and y by speed y. And, because of gravity, change speed y by -1. We'll position with costume 9. Remember, 9 is the costume of the particle. And then we will turn right, speed x times 4 degrees. Then, if frame is greater than 10, that means it's been around for 10 frames, we'll just remove it. Delete this clone. Perfect. Now we actually need to add these particles when we break the brick. Going into here, the test bump, where we have the brick code. In addition to what we're doing in here, we will add brick break to particles, the x of the tile to particles, and the y of the tile. Slot that in here. Let's test that out. Grab a mushroom, and yes, there are our particles. Now it's time for the real fun, which is making our trampolines and our POW blocks. We'll start with the trampolines. Grab the trampoline costume and put it into the tiles. This will be the tile for the editor. Now we'll drag all 4 into the enemy sprite. Let's go into the editor and show the tile key map list. Down at the bottom, we'll add another 9. That will be for the trampoline. And in the enemy sprite, we can put that into the spawn type block. Tile type equals 85 will spawn type trampoline. A costume of 38 and a width and height of 15. Okay, let's go into move enemy. And down at the bottom, if type is trampoline, make a new block called tick trampoline. This is getting to feel fairly familiar. We always do this whenever we make a new enemy. Okay, now this block will actually be pretty similar to the P-switch. In fact, I'm going to just duplicate the code. Of course, we're going to have to make some adjustments, but for example, the gravity will be the same, and in here, these checks will be the same for if Mario bounces on it. But here, instead of setting the P-switch, we will set bounce player to 5. And, like before, we'll change costume by 1. Now we'll leave this costume is greater than root costume, but in here, where it's greater than root costume plus 3, we'll set the costume back to the root costume. Let's try that out. We can remove the P-switch for now. Get ourselves trampoline instead. Oh yes. Boing! However, you may notice that it is bouncing on the middle. And if you're having this problem, just adjust the costumes so that the bottom is aligned with this line. Here's the middle, you go 2 below it, and it should be aligned with that line. Okay, we can try that again. And there we go, that looks better. Boing. Speaking of boing, we should add some sounds to it. Let's go into our assets and drag the bounce off enemy sound into the enemy. Now you actually already have that sound, but I just put it into the assets just for ease of access. So we'll start the sound right here. Okay. Wonderful. Now that is our trampoline. Next, it's time for the POW. Last but not least. Alright, take the top POW costume, drag it into the tiles, and drag the rest into the enemy. You know the drill by now. Head into the editor, and we'll do the same thing as before, show the tile key map. And it is doing this annoying thing, which I hate. It's a scratch bug, where the lists, they go off screen. So, when that happens, we just have to add 9 to the tile key map. Now, for you should just be able to show it and add a 9 at the next open spot. So we'll go into the enemy sprite and head to the spawn type block once more. Last time for today, if tile type is 86, we'll set this type to the POW. Costume of 42. Width and height the same. In move enemy, make one last block for the POW. Tick POW. This should run without screen refresh. Plop it in right here, and head over ready to code that block. Again, I'll duplicate the code. And we have slightly more changes to make this time, but it's still pretty similar. So here in the Touching Mario, instead of getting bopped from the top, the POW blocks get bopped from the bottom. So we'll check if speed y of Mario is greater than 0.1. And the y position of Mario, not y position up here, but y, is less than a y. Okay, so this is a hit from the bottom. I'm going to remove this, and we'll fill that out in a moment. I'm going to remove these blocks, and you'll notice, if we look at the costumes, that these top two are a blinking animation for the POW block. So we'll work on that animation right now. Okay, so we'll get an if-else statement. If frame is less than 2, then we'll set frame to frame plus 0.1. This is essentially changing frame by 0.1. But the reason we're doing it this way is we're going to modulo that by 2. So frame plus 0.1 mod 2. So when it gets to 2, it will go back to 0. Then we'll set costume to root costume plus floor of frame. Okay, that is our blinking animation done. We can code up the middle of this. And here we'll set frame to 2. A frame of 2 or greater is part of the explosion animation. And if you look at the costumes, you'll see that these actually get bigger. Up here, if frame is in fact 2 or greater, we will change frame by 0.75, and we'll set costume to the root costume plus, again, the floor frame. Now, we also have to check if frame is greater than 6. That means it's all done with the animation, and we destroy it. We can try this now. It won't kill any enemies, but it should play the animation. And I'll put the POW block up here. Let us bump it. And there we go. It explodes. Well, it plays the explosion animation. Let's make it actually explode. We are going to broadcast an event called POW Explosion. Okay. Now, enemies are, of course, one of the things that are affected by this. When I receive POW Explosion, we'll check if it is on screen. Okay, so this is stopping it if the enemy is off the screen to the left or right, and this is stopping it if it is off the screen to the top or bottom. Alright, so if the enemy has passed these tests, that means it is on screen. However, we still have one more test left to go. We need to make sure it is not a unflippable type. And this, we're going to say flip, life, end box, fire, flower, star, trampoline, P-switch, POW, contains type. So these are all the types that can't be flipped. Now we use the flip block, and it is easy as that. Let's try that. Boom, all dead. Alright, now you will have noticed that Mario goes right through the POW block, and it's supposed to, like, not let that happen. So, we need to add a check in the Mario sprite. When I receive POW explosion, we'll treat this like we've hit a ceiling. So we'll set the speed Y to 0, set jumping to 99, and set falling to 99. Now, if we try that, Mario should be able to, not go through it. Now, we can still walk through it as if it is not solid here because it isn't solid. And, again, that's just another solid entity thing. We don't have the code to be able to do that right now, sadly. One more thing, I think the POW block should have a sound when it explodes. When I go to tick POW, we will start sound. Then we need to grab it from our asset sprite. POW, and we'll put it into enemy. And start sound POW right before the POW explosion. Run over here. There we go. Okay. You will notice that the POW is backwards in the editor. Personally, I'm fine with that, but you can fix it if you would like. In the when I start as a clone, if type equals POW or type equals pswitch, we will just set the rotation style to don't rotate here. And then if we go over here, should stay forwards no matter which way we enter the editor. Okay, that is our POWs and our trampolines all done, and our P-switches all transformed into enemies. Now, this episode may not have been too exciting, but I assure you that the next one will be more exciting. Because we are going to be able to actually pick up those things, and it'll be a lot more fun once we can do that. And I do apologize for the long delay for this episode. Hopefully the next one will come sooner than that. I will see you all in the next episode, hopefully, and goodbye. Hope you have a great rest of your day.